everyone, welcome back to Anyone Can Cook with Lauren. I am Lauren, and today we're going to be doing some oven roasted carrots and a bone-in pork chop on a cast iron skillet. It's not as complicated as it sounds, and honestly it's one of my favorite things to make. It can be a really quick dinner. You can have it in the oven for a little while you're doing other things at night after work. It's a super easy meal. So we're going to start off with the carrots here. And we're going to start off with how to cut the carrots. So using a big knife, cutting vegetables can be a little intimidating, but carrots are one of the easier things to cut. So first we're going to just cut off the ends of the carrots here because those can be a little tough and a little dry. Okay, just set those aside. And then what I like to do with the carrots is I like to cut it in half, depending on how long they are, sometimes into thirds, and then cut that half into another half. Watch your fingers. Flip those over and cut those halves into other halves. So then you have quartered carrots. So I'm going to put these on a pan here. We're going to roast them in the oven. I have my oven back here preheated to 400. And we're going to go ahead and just get these carrots on this sheet pan here with some foil. So the thicker part of the carrots, sometimes I tend to cut these in half again, just so they cook a little more evenly with these. And these are a super easy vegetable to make. Carrots don't take much time at all, about 20-25 minutes in the oven on 400. Roasted carrots, perfect. I like using tricolor carrots too, the purple and white and orange. They have a really good flavor to them. And honestly, purple carrots are pretty good for you. So with the carrots, you might have noticed that I did not peel my carrots. I don't like peeling my carrots. I honestly don't mind the skin being on them. It's a root vegetable, so it's really not a big deal having the skin on the carrots. As long as you clean them well and there's no dirt left on them, it'll be totally fine and doesn't change the texture, doesn't really change the flavor. So we're gonna go ahead and just finish cutting these up. And with a big knife like this, you always kind of want to put the pressure on with your palm. You don't really use your fingers. You don't want to put your fingers anywhere near the front of the blade. You always want your palm flat on the top of the knife, pressing down. That way, you get a nice clean cut, the pressure is even, and you're not wobbling, sliding, and no potential to hurt yourself. Right? So quarter those. That one came out a little bit funky, but that's okay. They'll all still cook the same way. So I only use 2 carrots because this evening it's just myself. But if my husband were home or if I had guests, I'll obviously use more carrots. I usually do 2 carrots or 1.5 carrots per person, depending on the size of the carrots. So what we're going to do now is just lay them out on the sheet pan here. And we're just going to drizzle them with some olive oil. I have some extra virgin olive oil here. And we're just going to drizzle some on top. Okay. Just a few passes. And then here I have the seasoning for the carrots. So I have about a ½ teaspoon each of salt, black pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder. And I just have them mixed up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle them on top. You may not use all of it. That's fine. You just want to have plenty of seasoning there because you want your carrots to have plenty of flavor. And I honestly just use my hands and just toss them, mix them up. You can also put them in a gallon Ziploc bag if you have one and just shake them up. I do that too sometimes. So once they're pretty evenly coated and there's not too much dryness left on them, you want to make sure they're evenly coated with the seasoning and the oil. You can layer them back down in the pan, just kind of I like to do them in a straight line. Just pleasing to look at for me. All right, so once you have them laid out flat in the pan there, we can go ahead and put them in the oven. And these are going to roast in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on the thickness. If you had carrots that were pretty chunky carrots from the store, you probably want to go closer to 25 minutes, but you can always keep an eye on them and you can test them with a fork and they'll be soft when they're done. You don't want them mushy, you don't want them burnt. But in the oven, when they roast, they will get a nice caramelized bottom on them, the side that was on the pan. And that's honestly gonna be nice and sweet, and it gives it a little bit of a nice crunch almost on the bottom half. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put these in the oven, and I'm gonna do 20 minutes on these because these aren't too thick. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna do that now. All right, so while the carrots are in the oven, we're gonna go ahead and season our pork chop here. So this is a bone-in pork chop. It's about an inch, inch and a half thick. So we are gonna finish this in the oven, but we're just gonna sear it on the cast iron on the stove first. So here we have a paper towel, and what you wanna do is you just wanna dab it dry a little bit so that the seasoning will actually stick to the pork chop here. So we're gonna just dab that off. Get it nice and dry. There we go. And same with the carrots. We're just gonna sprinkle our seasoning on the pork chop. And you can use your fingers too, just so it's a little more even if you want. So I'm gonna go in and just grab a bunch and just sprinkle it on. And this is about a teaspoon of each seasoning. So a teaspoon of black pepper, salt, onion powder, and garlic powder. And just get it as even as you can. I tend to use a little more seasoning than what I'm probably gonna need because I just don't wanna have a situation where I don't have as much as I want. So we're gonna go ahead and just flip that over. There we go. Now a bone-in pork chop, these tend to be a little bit less expensive than the regular boneless pork chops because less work has been done to put them on the shelf. These also keep the moisture a little bit better, and it is a more, fatty cut of meat, so there is a lot more flavor in there, I think, as well. They don't dry out as quickly either, and honestly, I really love the flavor of the bone-in pork chops when they're done. So once you have a pretty even coating of that on there, you can go ahead and just set the rest of the seasoning aside. You can even keep a little jar of this in your cupboard pre-made for when you want to use it. And you can use it on vegetables, you can use it on chicken, on pork, on steak. Salt, pepper, onion powder, and garlic powder are awesome. You can use them with pretty much anything you want, even fish. And it's just a nice rounded out flavor profile and really simple, especially if you're new to cooking. You really can't go wrong. I even put garlic powder and onion powder in scrambled eggs, and it comes out amazing. So we have a cast iron on the stove heating up here with about a tablespoon of olive oil in it. And we also have 2 pats of butter here on the plate. It's about a tablespoon of butter per square. And those will come in once we have seared one side of the pork. We'll toss the butter in there. That way it gets a richer flavor and a better sear on it, a better color. And it honestly just takes this whole thing to a 10. So we are gonna let our pan back there heat up, and then once it's ready, we're gonna put on the pork chop. All right, so our pan is all heated up over here. I am just gonna tilt the pan a little bit to spread the olive oil around because there are some spots in the pan that were bare. You wanna be very careful handling a cast iron after it's been over the heat because even this end portion here that isn't super close to the burner, and sometimes even the handle, can become really, really hot. So you just wanna be careful that you don't burn yourself grabbing it. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put in our pork chop in the pan. And the sizzling means it's nice and hot, it's ready to go here. If it's not making that noise yet, just keep it off of there for a little bit longer, let it heat up for another minute, and then toss it on. So we're gonna leave it on this side probably for about 3 or 4 minutes, just to get a good crust on that side and help it cook through a little on that side as well. Because like I said, we are gonna finish this in the oven. So once we flip it over and put the butter in, we are gonna put it in the oven for a little while. It is pretty thick, so I would say maybe 7 or 8 minutes in the oven. That'll cook it all the way through. It'll also sear the bottom side. And it'll help brown the butter a little bit too in the oven because I do like using the butter on the pork chop at the end as well. That gives it a little bit of flavor while you're eating it, a little bit more moisture. So we're just gonna let this guy sit and sear on that side. And honestly, a cast iron is one of the best things that you can have if you live in a condo, apartment, if you are afraid to grill or if you can't afford a grill. This doesn't do the same thing as a grill, not quite, but it gives you a nice crust. It keeps the moisture in whatever you're cooking. And I've used this for everything. I've used this to fry fish. I use this to make fried mozzarella. I use this to make curry. I use this sometimes to make spaghetti and meatballs. It's really a versatile kitchen utensil. And honestly, they last forever if you take care of them. We have cast irons that are from the colonial era that you can just sandblast and oil them up and refinish them, and they're all good to go. So we're just gonna let this guy sit here for a few more minutes, and then once that side is done, we're gonna go ahead and flip him over. All right, so the pork chop is done on this side, so we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna flip this guy over here. You can see it's starting to smoke a little bit. That's gonna happen. You can see the nice crust on this side here. Tilt that a little, get you a good look. And if it gets too smoky, you can always put the fan on and you can turn the heat down a little bit. But I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna add in our butter. And help that melt it a little bit here, because we want to get some of the butter underneath as well on the side that we just flipped. So we want to help that along with melting. And then I'm going to very gently, I'm going to lift it up a little, tilt the pan, get the butter underneath, tilt it back this way, and plop it back down. Okay. And now while it's cooking as well, once the butter browns a little bit, I am going to get a spoon and start spooning some of the butter over the top. So we're going to let it sear on that side only for a minute or so, because it is going to finish in the oven. So we don't want to overcook that side. And we have about 8 minutes left on our timer. So I am going to grab that spoon and we're going to put some butter on the top. So you can use a basting brush with this too. I prefer not to, because I have ruined some of my basting brushes using them in a hot pan like this. But this is also going to help keep that moisture on the top layer here, let that butter soak in. And it's also going to help render the fat in the oven on the sides, so it gets a crispy outside to it. It is still going to be pretty fatty because it is a bone-in pork chop, so the fat content's pretty high. But it is a nice crust on the outside, and it does help break that fat down a little bit too. All right, and with 7 minutes on our timer here, we are going to go ahead and put this in the oven. Now, I will say, when you are moving a cast iron pan, you want to use an oven mitt. You do not want to try and grab it barehanded, even after it's just been on the stove and it hasn't been in the oven yet, because you can hurt yourself pretty badly. These get very, very hot. So we're going to put this in the oven with our carrots, and we will see them in a little while. All right, the timer is up on our pork chop and our carrots, so let's see how they're doing. All right, I see the pork chop is nice and brown. The butter is bubbling in the pan, all that good stuff. The fat is starting to render a little bit there. It looks really good. The carrots look like they're starting to caramelize on the bottom a little bit, sizzling away. So I'm just going to do a quick poke test here of the pork chop. Feels pretty firm, so I think we're all good to go. All right, guys, so we have our finished bone-in pork chop and our roasted carrots here. Just give you a little closer look. You can see that nice crust on the outside, all the butter. The carrots look great. They've caramelized a little bit on the bottoms. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna try these out. Let's try a carrot first. Let's see how that turned out. Yeah, the seasoning is great. And like I said, it's a pretty easy flavor profile, super simple. Most people will probably love it because those are just the 4 basic flavors for cooking. So they will taste good on anything you want to put them on. So let's go ahead and we're going to cut into this pork chop as well. As you saw in the oven, I did the poke test. So basically that's just testing what, if the meat is no longer soft, it's cooked through. And you can see here, the meat springs right back up. It's pretty firm. That means it's done. And if you have a meat thermometer, you can also measure it to the temperature of 165 for pork. That's just the safe temperature. So I let this rest for a couple of minutes so the juices can kind of soak back into the meat here. And I did put some of that nice butter from the pan on top. So let's go ahead and we're just going to cut into this here. Yep, and that's how you want a pork chop to look. You want that to be the nice, almost a super pale pink, pretty much white. That means it's cooked through correctly all the way, and the meat is still going to be moist and still going to be tender. So I'm just going to cut off a little corner here. Okay. And let's see how he did. I love pork chops. Honestly, you can't go wrong with pork chops. The flavor is awesome. I love pork in general, but the flavor with bone-in pork chops is just amazing. It's amazing how much better it is than just a standard boneless pork chop. And I think it has a lot to do with the bone and with that fat content in there. That's all the flavor being stored, and that just seeps out into the meat when you cook it. So if you guys have any questions, comments, put it down in the comments below. If you guys have a favorite way you like cooking pork, let me know. When you do this, you can also add seasonings too. You can add thyme, you can add rosemary with that butter in the pan. I just chose a basic flavor tonight because I wasn't feeling fancy right now. You can also have this with a side of applesauce and for dipping, and it is really, really good. So the recipe for this will be down in the description as well as the instructions. And as always, this has been Anyone Can Cook. And remember, anyone can cook.